My name's Caroline Tapkin, and I'm collaborating with Travel Daily Media to bring you interviews with inspirational women in travel in Asia. So today we are welcoming Suyin Lee. Suyin, Discova, tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself to us, please.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you for having me here today as well. As you mentioned, I'm the Managing Director of Discova, which is a B2B destination management company that looks after our clients' customers in destination, everything from transport, accommodation, tours, and experiences. So we currently operate in Asia, Central America, and the Caribbean across 14 markets. Personally, I'm a Malaysian-born Chinese Australian. That's quite a long sentence, I know. The eldest of 3 girls. So grew up in Australia, and I've been in Singapore for the last 11 years. And I've spent the better part of probably the last 2 decades working in various Asian markets.
So how did you get into travel?
Quite by accident, really. I didn't grow up as a travel consultant. I didn't come out of school and move into travel like many people did in my company, which is the Flight Centre Travel Group. I was actually a chartered accountant. So I completed a Bachelor of Commerce, which is a very popular choice for children of Asian immigrants in Australia, particularly. And I joined a Big Four accounting firm, Ernst & Young, straight out of university, which was, really not really great timing. It was the start of the Australian recession in 1990. And so there were very few graduate positions, and I was just really grateful for the opportunity and really worked my butt off, really, as an auditor, both in Brisbane and in Hong Kong, for about 7 years before I moved into the private sector. And from there, I just worked in telecommunications, and then I joined Flight Centre in 2001, where I've been since then in many different roles.
What drew you to Flight Centre?
Well, I decided to stay in Brisbane because I'd worked in Sydney, I worked in Hong Kong. I went back to Brisbane to do my MBA, and after I finished my MBA, I really thought, well, what would I do now? Would I move back overseas? Would I move down to New South Wales or to Sydney? And then I met my husband, and I decided to stay in Queensland. So there's not that many great options, and Queenslanders might hate me for saying this, but there's not many great options if you wanted to build your career in finance. I thought in Queensland at the time, or in Brisbane, and Flight Centre seemed like a great choice because it was service oriented, travel was exciting, obviously, and it was a high growth company. That was really what attracted me to the company.
Okay.
Yeah, so an old colleague from Ernst & Young approached me, and I decided to go for the interview, and I loved what I heard. So I stayed in Flight Centre, where I've been. This is my 21st year, so it was okay.
Congratulations there.
Thank you.
I mean, one of your profiles online has some very encouraging terminology, some very interesting, inspirational wording. You describe yourself in some places passionate about creation of sustainable livelihoods. What does that mean?
As I'm working in Asia, I think for the last 2 decades, and particularly in the last, 4 or 5 years where I've worked with Discova, we do a lot of work in local communities, and I think it really opened my eyes to on how we can really empower and help the local communities to create sustainable livelihoods. And tourism is a very, very good vehicle for that if done in a really responsible way that is respectful of the local communities and our ability to help bring sustainable livelihoods without flooding a destination or overwhelming it with mass tourism. So, in the last few years working with Discova, I really have this, I really got a glimpse about how working in travel, as we do, bringing in travelers or looking after visitors and guests from different countries, could really help some of these local communities create, another source of livelihood that can sustain that community, develop skills in those communities that is helpful in creating sort of experiences or homestays that give them a different form of livelihood. So that was really...
Give us. Are there some specific examples you can give us of how it's perhaps changed lives?
Oh, absolutely. So in some of the villages that Discova have worked with, and some of them have been there for over 10 years, for example, Chansa village in Siem Reap in Cambodia, we've been there since 2008, and really working with the local villagers, and they really drive, the agenda. We're there as a facilitator and enabler and to help support these initiatives. But we've helped, bring school groups to that village, and so help the local community in developing know-how in creating safe homestays, in being able to cater for meals and for the visiting students that come and stay in the villages for a couple of years. And through those years, in making sure a chunk of our tourism revenue goes back to that community, or that, through the fundraising efforts of the schools for these communities, we've been able to build, infrastructure like schools, healthcare, infrastructure for the community around their farming and so forth. So it's really been able now to create a much better, living environment for the villagers, as well as now giving them a sustainable form of income, because obviously our guests continue to go to those villages. And so now the villagers are involved in all sorts of activities with us. They might have cooking classes, they may have arts and craft classes, which we've taught and helped the women develop as part of the experiences that you could get in this village. So that is an example. I mean, in lots and lots of ways, it doesn't have to be a community. I think as a multinational working in so many of these emerging markets, we have this opportunity to really make a difference in terms of upskilling our local talent, be able to provide education, to be able to help create careers for men and women, but girls especially, because travel may not be a profession or a career that they even think about joining. Most parents might want them to take on a more traditional profession.
So have you seen that it's helped the girls get more involved in their local communities?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we at Discova, we have probably half of our workforce are women, and they come from all different demographics, whether they're young mum or mums with more mature kids, or whether they're just straight out of university. And I think that's just come about because we believe in gender equality, and we believe in a meritocracy approach to promotions and leadership roles and so forth. So we have seen that just being able to create an environment where anyone can succeed, and supporting them through training, regardless of your gender or your seniority, has really helped. And I think when women start to succeed and they then become role models for other women and other girls, I think that's where you get, that's where you start to build momentum. I think, success breeds success. And I think for a lot of our women, particularly in Indochina, they have to balance family expectations, cultural norms, raising families. And I think the more that we can support them through that, and the more successful they become at balancing that and being successful in their careers, I think that that creates, that they really establish good role models for other women in their community. They become real influencers, I think, for younger generations.
Is this a general philosophy that you apply to all the markets that you work in? Or do you have specific areas that you work with the local communities?
No, I think it's generally our philosophy. It is one of Discova's. It's also my personal kind of purpose. I mean, I sort of fell into it because I've been working in Asia for so long, and I found that as a female leader in a lot of Asian countries, and travel at the senior ranks is still very much dominated by men. So I think people were sort of curious, and a lot of the women that worked in the business were curious, and I guess perhaps that they were then inspired to also take on leadership roles. And so through all these years, I think without really having a very clear purpose for doing so, I think you start to influence and make a difference. And for me, it's always been about gender equality, regardless. And I've grown up in I've got two siblings who are women, so we've come from an all-girls household, so I don't know any different. I haven't ever had to compete with brothers or anything like that. So I think we've just really made sure we could support men and women to be their best. And I think through doing so, and I guess being a female leader, perhaps I've really just sort of help to influence women who may not have been sure of pursuing their careers, and been a sounding board and an advisor and a mentor to a lot of women that hopefully have made a difference. But certainly where we work now as a DMC in so many amazing destinations in Asia, I think it's really kind of made that focus even greater for me, because there is curiosity, there is desire, there's just probably just not enough mentors, I think, for these young women as to what they could do with their lives, what careers that they could have, particularly in travel, which is historically seen as really not a profession. It's not a white collar type career that you would have. So it's a bit not mysterious, but a lot of parents would kind of ask their kids or challenge their kids, why would you want a career in travel? Why would you want to be a travel agent for one? So I think it's about us being able to paint a view of what could be, and upholding, senior leaders in our business who are women who have developed very successful careers in travel, to be able to kind of lead the way, to mentor, to guide, and just to promote.
Sounds fantastic. What motivates you to get out of bed each morning?
Gosh, I think, look, I love this industry, but I think, I think you might have, I'm a growth junkie. So I love growing businesses, building businesses, and being able to help grow and develop people. That's what makes me get out of bed in the morning. If I can make a difference to a business, to people that work in that business, and I can see that grow, then that's what makes me get out of bed in the mornings. And from a travel perspective, 21 years was, a long time to spend in this sector. And people often ask me, it's so hard. Why do you want to do it? I said, I love that it is so complex. I love that it is so diverse, and it's an ever-changing landscape. So I like the challenge because it's constantly keeping me on my toes. And travel is extremely competitive, and so that also motivates me to do better each day, to create a better business, because if you aren't at the top of your game in travel, you probably won't last very long. So I think it's a bit of everything, but ultimately I like constant change. I like diversity. I like the ability to grow businesses and to grow people. That's my thing. And I think, you know, in the last few years at Discover and with the whole sustainability and responsible tourism, it's given me greater clarity about my purpose, which is really now about helping and empowering less fortunate sort of communities in being able to create sustainable livelihoods, and for women to be able to finish school and to be able to have a career and to have independence. You know, that's really been my passion in the last few years, though I've not always sort of seen that. I think I felt it, and I was doing a lot of things that were sort of along that vein, but it's kind of been a bit clearer for me in the last few years.
Sometimes passion takes a while to manifest itself,
doesn't it?
It develops as you grow and you experience. It develops.
You know, and people always ask me, you know, what are you passionate about, Suyin? You know what? Because I am, you know, I am very enthusiastic about most things that I do, but you know, where does all this passion come from? It's not an easy question to answer, because it's inherent. It's something you feel inherently, but you don't sit around long enough to think about it. And yeah, so I think for me, it's been a really humbling experience, to be honest, Caroline, working in some of these communities where I'm always amazed by the resilience and the resourcefulness, particularly of women in these communities, you know, creating livelihoods to feed their families, to support their families, where under really challenging conditions. And for me, I think that's what kind of gets me out of bed, to be able to better support these women who have so much desire, you know.
So much drive. Yeah.
So much drive, and they're so resilient. It's quite incredible to see. And really what's just missing, and I think you see that a lot, certainly for me in my travels through Asia, is it's not for the lack of intelligence, not for the lack of desire or proactivity. Sometimes it's just the lack of opportunity. You know, a lot of these women that I meet just simply never had the opportunity to finish education, which to me, you know, the lack of education in my mind is the root of all evil. It's just the greatest gift. And so a lot of the work that I do personally, and also with Discover, is around education. How can we help more and more girls finish school, go to university? At least you have choice, right? Like when you have that behind you, then it's really up to them what they do with it.
Sure. You mentioned sustainable tourism there. I mean, is that a bit of a buzzword these days, or are you seeing actual action?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is a lot of buzzwords, but I think, you know, the world is changing. I think a couple of things people have realized, especially during this pandemic, you know, and even prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of activism around mass tourism. There was a lot more focus around sustainable tourism. And I think people as a whole, because they're more educated, the traveling public is more educated. You've got the millennials and the Gen Zs who are now becoming travelers, who care deeply about the planet that they live on and about, you know, doing no harm. So I think all those things have culminated, even pre-COVID, to challenging, I think, the travel model, challenging mass tourism. So I think I feel it's still early days, but there's certainly a lot more focus. There's certainly a lot more talk between the stakeholders around creating sustainability, and certainly customers are asking for it, which is a great thing. They're asking for better ways to travel. They don't really want to flood a destination. They're looking for more authentic experiences, more ethical experiences. So I think, you know, I think it's more than a fad, I think, to put it in a concise way. It's more than the fad, and I hope that it is growing momentum. And we are seeing it. We are seeing it in a lot of great operators, that really do give back to the community, that are very respectful of, environment, that are respectful of local cultures, that really help to build this sort of sustainable experiences, that I think is a growing trend. So I'm hopeful.
Hopeful, yes. I mean, we'd all like a crystal ball, wouldn't we? But do you foresee perhaps the events of the last 18 months now have really changed people's attitudes and perceptions of travel? Or do you think we'll just go back to the way we were?
That is a very popular, very common question. I think, again, it's a crystal ball, isn't it? But I would hope, time will tell, but I would hope that, it's just going to be harder, Caroline, for people to travel, right? Because the safety aspects of it. So from a demand perspective, I think it lends itself to sustainability in the sense that not everyone can travel. It's going to be harder to travel. You may not be able to just jump on a plane like you used to. So maybe you really make your experience count, right? Maybe you can't travel 6 times a year. You can travel 2 times a year, but you really make it very valuable and really savor that experience. I think people are more concerned than ever around safety. So social distancing and making sure that you don't go to really crowded destinations, I'm hoping is going to bring a certain element of sustainability, that we're just not going to be flooding destinations with people, that people are going to be more open to potentially visiting less known destinations, still getting that authenticity, still getting that experience of local cultures and people and whatever have you, but more willing to do that in less known destinations.
Do you have a less known destination in mind? What would be your top less known destination?
Well, it's if you kind of think about, it's not so much a country per se, but destinations within a country. So if we all just flood to, say, Thailand is a great example, right? So everyone goes to Phuket, and Phuket is, unfortunately was a very, very heavily trafficked destination.
Yeah.
But there is so much more in Thailand that people wouldn't even know about, or wouldn't even have considered touring Thailand outside of Phuket, Bangkok, potentially Koh Samui, So imagine going to places like Hua Hin or outside of Hua Hin. There's some beautiful national parks. Imagine northern Thailand and not just, to the usual suspects. There's a lot of places that we could be traveling to around Thailand that people just wouldn't consider or may not even know about, right? Because
probably don't know about, because it's not.
Yeah, they're just not
popular.
Promoted by tourism bodies or the NTOs. So I think, it's the same in Vietnam. We see, everyone goes to Ha Long Bay, but yet there's so many other places that you can go through, Langkawi Bay and wherever else, that are less trafficked, but just as beautiful, So it is just a matter of us educating and promoting these destinations as, people in travel and travel operators to give it some airtime,
Now's a great opportunity, isn't it, as we start again, basically?
Yes. And look, it is tricky because you've got this pent up demand, and maybe the last memory I have is Phuket, and I loved it. I haven't been there for 2 years, and maybe my tendency is just to flood back and do what I've always done. But I hope that, it is going to be harder, with restarting travel and the requirements that you're going to have, and social distancing and safety, that people are, hopefully going to be more open to new destinations or a different style of traveling.
Hopefully we put some more thought into it before we just leap onto planes. So as we wrap up, I mean, very interesting discussion and fascinating background you have here. As we wrap up, who inspired you along the way, or who inspires you now?
Gosh, lots of people really. And it's not just any one individual. So from a leadership perspective, I was really fortunate early on in my career at Flight Centre to work with an amazing leader called Margaret Mulholland. And Marg was a key, she was a key mentor for me and really helped me be comfortable in my own skin as a leader and not trying to be someone else. She also helped me learn to not to be striving for perfection, which, for me, I'm quite OCD in certain ways and a bit of a control freak early on in my career. So she was really instrumental in helping me just learn to be myself as a leader. And then I think along the way with sustainability and travel and the passion for responsible tourism, lots of people, I think, Graham Harper, who's now the Director of Sustainability at Parton, he used to work with us at Buffalo Tours as we were known back then, really opened my eyes to responsible tourism and challenge the knowledge that you get from press or social media. He just really encouraged me to dig deeper and to understand the issues a little bit better than what I would read on social media. And I think, I've met some incredible social entrepreneurs along the way, people who like Jimmy Pham from Koto in Vietnam, who runs a hospitality school for Vietnamese street kids, and giving them that ability to create a sustainable livelihood in hospitality and tourism. Matthew Spacey, who was the founder of the Magibus Foundation, who worked with children in Indian slums to really take them from childhood to livelihood through sports and games and education from a very young age. So people like that, who, are just seemingly, they weren't philanthropists, they were just people who just saw a problem and who saw an opportunity to make a difference. And it just kind of inspired me that anyone can do this if you cared enough and that you could channel your focus and your energy towards something that you felt was really important. So
it's a real culmination of experiences and a real journey to get to where you are today, isn't it? It doesn't happen overnight. Exactly.
And it could just be a very ordinary person that you meet on your travels, right? It could be the lady in the market in Phuket or in Hoi An, and it's just about taking the time to really just understand their stories and listening rather than just going there to shop or eat. I mean, all that's important, don't get me wrong, but it's about really trying to understand and being curious about their stories and their lives. And then you learn so much, right? And you're so inspired by what they have done, in spite of circumstances and how hard they have to work just to sustain themselves and their families. And then you kind of go, wow, could their lives be a little bit different if circumstances were different or opportunities were there for them, So yeah, for me, I think it's just everyday people that you meet on your travels. I think if you take the time just to understand and to be curious, I think
approach with a little curiosity instead of
it's very inspirational. Yeah.
Okay, final question. What advice would you give to young people, young girls setting out on their careers today?
Gosh, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think, every one of us, and sometimes we think we don't, but we do, we have a choice, right? And I think, and if you don't really know what you want to do, if you're not certain about a certain career path, I think my advice is talk to people, get curious, read, research, talk to people, educate yourself. And also along the way, don't be afraid to explore and make mistakes in your career. You know, I think early on in my career, I was so terrified of taking that wrong job. Oh, is this the right role for me? Should I just move jobs? You know, and I think along the way, I've learned that it's, you know, your career isn't really a destination. It sounds really cliched, but it is a journey, right? So be comfortable in taking wrong turns, because it's just about learning more about yourself and finding out what makes you want to jump out of bed in the mornings, you know? So to me, I think it's be curious, don't give up, you know, be brave and be fierce. So if it's worth fighting for, then fight for it. You know, it is, it's really important that women have that confidence to do that. I know it's easier said than done, but it's just, you know, it's a journey.
I think,
and last but not least,
yeah. Go on, sorry.
So, and I think last but not least is, for me, I think it's about finding a really supportive network, Caroline. You know, find yourself a good role model, find yourself a really great mentor, people that inspire and motivate you rather than criticize what you do or constantly challenge why you're doing something. So I think if you surround yourself with people who really encourage, inspire, and motivate you and have a great mentor, you know, or a role model, I think it's much easier, I think, for women to succeed.
I think that's a fantastic place to end. Surround yourself with good mentors, good people who support you rather than bring you down.
Yeah.
Be fierce. I mean, failure is an opportunity to succeed. It's not the end of the world. And just be brave and get curious. I think there's some great advice there. Thank you, Suyin, for your time today, and thank you for joining us, and an inspirational story that I hope will inspire others to follow in your footsteps.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for having me today and for allowing me to share my story.
Pleasure. Wishing you every success.
Thank you.